Do you like symmetry? Do you love symmetry? Must everything be symmetrical to be perfect? Yes? Do you wish for it? Do you dream of the perfect symmetry? Then, my friends, this is not the build for you. This is an affront to the senses, a violation of the most sacred principles of terrain building. You have been warned. So, I've been on a Skyrim kick lately, which of course made me think about Oblivion. And that led to me thinking about the Oblivion Gates. Then I ended up finding an old sketch while I was cleaning up, and I had to draw out this interesting death, the Norse, hell-themed gateway that I intended to be for a much more massive terrain build. So I decided, why not resurrect that? Let's combine a Norse hell theme with an Oblivion theme, and we're gonna have to talk about the results and why you don't need to be extra. In the original vision, I felt that this gate would be sitting over a refuse channel filled with body parts and skulls, with a noose hanging down between each of these pillars. Was originally going to have a number of smaller, vaguely curved spurs, which would jut out at various angles to kind of simulate the idea of like a non-Euclidean orb. Unfortunately, this proved to be very unwieldy with the base I built, and I had to drop the idea pretty early on. Without a proper hot wire knife or table saw, these extra spurs just did not work for getting anything uniform. When I started to look at some of the extra bits on these spurs of stone that I wanted to add to the gate, why did I want to add them? Chaos. I wanted to create something that was an affront to the senses. But why not try to emulate that very chaotic and asymmetrical with less material? Say the banding ornamentation that was going to be added to these spurs. I already planned to use cardstock to create a kind of worn metal banding and ornamentation for this gate. But why not make that itself the chaotic element? And if you like that idea, and you want some more non-traditional terrain builds, then why not subscribe and be the non-conformist? So with that in mind, and the main parts of the gate cut into a rough shape, I got to work with the cardstock banding. This proved to be a lot harder than I thought. The cardstock fought me to force it into any shape to adhere itself, retreated from where I set it, and generally just came out very messy. But I can justify it. Stone on this gate is old and the metal is shifted, and it's eroded away at the stone over time. Bam! Checkmate. Feeble excuse. But the perfect is the enemy of the good. Each side of the gate has a different manner in which the banding gets applied. For an altar with a channel in the center. So I used some cast-offs to create kind of a pseudo platform over the center of the pit. At that point in time, I fully intended to add a noose here to kind of sell the idea of the voluntary sacrifice of Odin hanging from the world tree. Yet, when I dry fitted the entire piece and started to put some connectors into those gate pieces, I found that it was too much for the small scale. I had cut the base far too small for these, frankly, somewhat oversized gate pieces. There was just no room, and once I started adding the ornamentation, like the skulls, the bull, and the row of spikes to the back, it was just too much. with a mini standing on the base, there was just too much going on, and it had to be pulled back. So the sacrifice theming is gonna have to be retired and probably end up being added to something else later. To round off the construction, I just added some sculpted mold to kind of help the base add a little bit of extra weight to it and act as a bit of sealant for that channel in the center. For the painting, I elected to go in the same style as my Nightmare Frontier set, working with a dark blue base and then a couple of shades of blue, and then a final highlight of white, washed down with a mixture of browns and dark greens, and it fits in with the various Nightmare Frontier terrain builds that I've done in the past. The skulls then got a quick lick of bone white, then some skeleton horde contrast with the final dry brush of that bone white to bring back some of the highlights. Very simple. The metal banding for this one and the spikes themselves is a little interesting here. So I started with a base of bronze, and then I gave that a highlight of a brighter gold and then a very fine dry brush edge highlight of very bright silver. This all got blended back with a pure green wash that I deliberately worked into the stone around where the banding is, just where it touches ever so slightly, to kind of sell the idea of a metal leaching into stone, which is important if you're going to be putting aged stone with this kind of metal banding. The last part of this build was the resin, and the most nerve-wracking. This almost never goes well for me. And yet, this time, it went well. With just a drop of red ink to tint my resin in a way to suggest blood, I filled the altar vessel and then reached for my secret weapon. Dried tea leaves with various dried spices that have a variety of shapes and colors. A green tea and a licorice tea, I believe, was this particular mix. This mix was just dropped into the resin and mixed up to turn that smooth resin meant for water into a chunky debris charnel looking mixture of blood and various other bits. Something like a sewer backup or something like that. The tea bits mixed in, and with enough of them in the mix, it slowed the flow of the resin enough that it didn't immediately run off the piece, allowing me to manipulate it to an extent. And it ended up adding this very interesting texture to the channel that I very much like, and it helps to differentiate the channel area from the edges of the base where I use the coffee grounds to add some texture. And this one I had to let it set at a little bit of an incline so it didn't all spill out, and you get this. A resin pour I am legitimately happy with. A piece I'm happy. Is this what it feels like to be happy? Yeah, I'm happy with it. I'm happy with the way it came out, and it very much assists my confidence. I think I'm getting a grip on this material that fights me a lot. As an objective marker, this thing is going to be amazing for an army of corn from AOS, or a wandering hunter lost in a nightmare, or just anytime I just needed a portal that looks vaguely evilish for any of my RPG games. If you like this, Victor, and you want to see some more of them, then make sure you're subscribed and toll the bell so you don't miss a single win in the future. And if you really like this, then why not subscribe and suggest in the comment section a companion piece for this gate, maybe using some of the abandoned themes.